So I received a request to make a video explaining the differences between dual overhead cams, single overhead cams, and overhead valves, or more commonly known as pushrod. So I'm going to go through those. You'll probably see things like DOHC labeled on the side of cars, SOHC, and you might not know what it means. So once again, dual overhead cams, single overhead cams, and OHV stands for overhead valves, but more commonly they're called pushrod. So what a camshaft does is as it rotates, so it'll be rotating like this, and as it rotates in this direction, basically it's just a cylinder with a lobe on the end of it, and as this lobe rotates, it'll come in contact with this rocker arm right here. I've got everything color labeled, so anything green is a camshaft, anything blue is a rocker arm, and anything red is a spring. So this camshaft will rotate, the lobe will press against this rocker arm, which pivots at this point. So as it pivots, it'll push down this valve, opening it up, letting air to either go out or come in, depending on if it's an intake or an exhaust valve. So now I'm going to go through each of the three types and some advantages of each. So the first one here is the pushrod, and how that works is you'll have a camshaft that's in the center. This is going to be a V engine, so from above you're going to have the 6 cylinders here and the camshaft in the middle. So as that camshaft rotates, it'll push against these lifters, and these lifters are connected to push rods, this black line right here. That push rod will push up on the rocker arm. Once again, it'll pivot at that point, and it'll push the valve in. So with a push rod, typically you're going to have all your valves in a line going back, and so you'll have typically 2 valves per cylinder. Less efficient to have 2 valves, but that's just the way some companies do it. It is possible now to have a rocker arm for each valve and have 4 valves per cylinder, but it's not quite as common. Some advantages of this: it's more compact because you can keep the camshaft inside with the engine rather than putting it on top like the other methods. It's less complex, therefore cheaper, and you can use higher weight oils because you don't have these complicated rocker arm camshaft systems that require a great amount of lubrication. One thing I should mention also is there's springs connected here, just valve springs, and so as that rocker arm pushes the valve in, it needs something to force it back up. So once the cam is off the lifter, that spring will push the rocker arm back up and it'll close the valve. Alright, so single overhead cam, so you'll have overhead, meaning it's above the cylinders rather than to the side of. So you'll have it, and this is just an inline 4 from above. It's just going to look like that. Camshaft above, 4 cylinders. So how it works is, say the camshaft is rotating counterclockwise here. It'll hit this rocker arm, push the exhaust, let the exhaust go out. It'll keep rotating, hit the intake rocker arm. That'll rotate here, push the intake in, and as that piston goes back down, it can suck in air. So it'll be a single camshaft above all of the cylinders, and then it will control both the intake and exhaust valves. Now in this, it's more common to see 3 or 4 valves per cylinder because it's easier to do with the rocker arms connecting here and the lobes. So some advantages: you have less inertia forces. So here with this push rod, when you're going to have this cylinder, this push rod, moving back and forth, there's nothing balancing that inertia. Whereas here, you're not going to have that great of a inertia force, just because the items are smaller and they're rotating a much smaller amount. So with this, the push rod, you've got this long pin and it's getting thrown back and forth, back and forth. So at higher speeds, it becomes a problem with the balancing. So that's an advantage of single overhead cams, or just overhead cams in general. And overhead cams in general are also more efficient. Main reason being you can have more valves per cylinder. So finally, dual overhead cams. So you'll have one camshaft for the intake valves and one camshaft for the exhaust valves. So each one will be dedicated for the intake or exhaust. That's a nice thing to have. And with that, you can have better performance, and you can rev at much higher RPMs because you're not having to deal with these inertia forces, and it's a better design. So from above, that's what it'll look like. You'll have the two camshafts, and typically with dual overhead cams, you'll always have 4 valves per cylinder. It's even possible to have 5 valves if you want 3 intakes and 2 exhausts, just to smoothen things out and increase flow and just make it overall more efficient.